So I think people are still trickling in, but I think we'll go ahead and get started just for sake of time. So hello, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us this morning for our brown bag lunch. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Kevin Conklin, and I'm a research associate with working with Liz Brown on the Cost Transparency Initiative at the Center for Effective Global Action, housed at UC Berkeley. For those of you who are not familiar with CTI, the main goal is to generate rigorous and transparent tools, as well as analyses, to support the production of cost evidence and promote its use by policymakers and other decision makers. As part of this initiative, CIGA founded the Costing Community of Practice in 2020 to serve as a forum for cost analysis within a wide range of research and development organizations to convene and share research, ideas, and new costing initiatives, basically anything and all things costing. The Brown Bag Lunch Series is a collection of talks given throughout the year by community of practice members to present recent work in costing and prompt discussion. So today is going to be one of those talks, and we have the pleasure of hosting the lead authors of USAID's new training course on costing methodology. And our panelists today will walk us through a bit of that training and sort of how it's run and how the CCOP can kind of get involved to help promote that. We have three main panelists. The first who will be speaking is Elena Wells. She is a senior monitoring, evaluation, and learning advisor with the Center for Education at USAID. We also have Christine Harris Van Kuren, who is the head of SALT Analytics, which is a women-owned small business that specializes in economic and financial analysis of global development projects. And we also have Emma Venitas, who is a monitoring, evaluation, and learning specialist at Encompass. So before passing it off to them, just want to let you all know that you should feel free to enter questions into the Q&A. We will try to answer those questions as they come in where possible. And anything that requires further discussion, we'll leave a few minutes at the end to do a more robust sort of discussion. And with that, I will pass it off to Elena to start.
Thank you so much, Kevin, and hi, everyone. So as Kevin said, my name is Elena Walls, and I'm Senior Male Advisor with the Center for Education at USAID Washington. I've also had the distinct pleasure of leading cost measurement initiative at USAID Education sector for the past 7 years, working for most of this time alongside my lovely colleagues here, Chris and Emma, who you will hear from very soon. But before I turn over to them to dig deep into the kind of a nuts and bolts of cost analysis and the new course that we developed, I just wanted to give you guys a very brief overview of our cost measurement initiative. So for those of you who don't know much about USAID, and I don't know if there are many people on the line, but just in case, just wanted to start with the general overview. Can you guys see it? Yeah, you can. Okay, great. So we have about $1 billion in annual appropriations, 3/4 of which are allocated to basic education and about 1/4 to higher education. So we work in 64 countries. And what's important to understand is that we don't implement directly, as you said. We work via local and international partners. So it's important because it means that we do not necessarily implement via partner governments like some other donors frequently do, like the World Bank or GPE, who frequently work via grants, direct grants to partner governments. We don't do that much. We do it a little bit, but not too much. Most of our investments are made via implementing partners. And it has implications for how costing actually works. So that's why I'm highlighting that. Also important to note that our work in the education sector is regulated by USAID Education Policy of 2018 and also USG Strategy for Basic Education, both of which highlight the explicit focus on learning outcomes and concrete system change, measurable system change as our core priorities. So important also to note kind of the progression of this work. I think it's important just to see where it all started and how far we've come. So actually, our cost work began in 2013 When cost data collection analysis was first recommended by our office to USAID missions overseas as part of education programming under 2011 education strategy. This recommendation has shown up as a contractual requirement at the time in many early grade reading awards, but it didn't actually come with any clear guidance of how to do that or what to do with findings. So as a result, not much happened between 2013 and 2016. I was brought on board specifically to try to move this work forward through new guidance notes or like specific technical assistance to the sector to respond to what already existed on paper as award requirements to our partners, but didn't really come with any kind of specific clear guidance. So at the time, recognizing that you can't analyze what you don't have, I started with developing guidance for partners on how to collect cost data before we even started thinking about the analysis. So we have cost data collection, cost reporting, we call it guidance. I don't know, Emma, maybe you can drop it and the link in the box, that'd be great. So during those first years, we worked with the activities, the projects that had a requirement of cost analysis included in terms of the award to pilot the guidance and ascertain the feasibility of collecting cost data in real time. We focused also on assessing the burden on partners as well as missions, as well as the quality of the resulting data. Concurrently, we worked with our policy bureau to promote this idea that the agency needs to pay attention to costing as really a critical element in decision making. We had this big win in 2020 that shows up on this visual when we managed to include a cost analysis requirement for all impact evaluations implemented with USAID funding. And then the same year, we also developed and issued our first guidance on cost analysis. So that is the guidance that became the foundation for the training that we subsequently developed, and that kind of the focus of this presentation today. So after that, we focused really on two major areas: establishing a regulatory backing to make our work sustained long-term, and also building the capacity of both USAID staff and implementing partners to collect, analyze, and use cost data. And in terms of the sector capacity specifically, this is a really big gap that we feel we have. We have literally just a few people who historically have been implementing this analysis, and I think 2-3 of them on this call, right? And not that many outside. So we really feel like to make this work mainstream, we need to change that. We need to make sure, just same with like evaluations, when we have a lot of qualified evaluators right now, we need to build the capacity of these evaluators and also newer people to implement cost analysis. Investing in this new generation of professionals who can routinely analyze cost data and feed this information back into decision making. So to summarize, this is basically our core objectives. And one thing we've been fighting against is like a narrow understanding of costing as just an accountability exercise. And unfortunately, it still persists in much of documentation out there online. Accountability is, of course, important, and it's hardwired in any kind of a bureaucratic processes at USAID. But what we really want folks to understand is that without cost data, it's really difficult to make important decisions, such as also transferring effective interventions to governments, deciding which interventions to invest in. And again, remember, we're talking about $1 billion, so it's not exactly petty cash. So it's really difficult to ensure that our programming is efficient and we're doing the most good with the money we have if we don't have those kind of data, the clarity around the cost of implementing different types of interventions, information about cost drivers, all of these things. So we found that having visibility into cost details of interventions is really a game changer. Many costs have previously been completely invisible to agency staff, to implementers themselves, because our projects are so big, we have so many people working on them. So there are very few people who actually see the full picture, and even fewer who can really interpret cost data in relation to result data to help us understand how those two square up, right? And where do we have flexibilities for change to make programs more efficient. So basically, again, just to summarize, these are two key objectives: improving value for money, wanting to do more good with resources that we have, and also sustainability, making sure that our investments have lasting impact, that they don't just end with 5-year awards, but instead have really life beyond that. So how do we measure cost? This is the critical piece that is really the foundation for our cost analysis. So how do we make sure that we have the data to analyze? Let me tell you in brief about our approach. The most important thing to understand is that we are not building a parallel system. We are not asking partners to submit, well, we ask a little bit, not too much, parallel reports in addition to the financial reporting. Instead, what we do, we are asking them to use the systems that they already have, the accounting system, and simply tag different expenditures according to some predetermined criteria, which are outlined and now on cost reporting guidance. This is actually quite huge because we know from experience that asking partners to collect cost data completely separately from the existing financial reporting processes doesn't really work. It is too expensive, it's too imprecise, and it's really burdensome. So we're really trying to ensure that instead our partners simply use very minor tweaks to the existing accounting systems that they have, and that would allow us to collect data in this very systematic and consistent way concurrently. This is a really important point. So it's not done retrospectively, it's done concurrently. So the other piece that we also request is data on non-USAID inputs, such as participant costs, donated resources, donations, in-kind donations by the partner government, for example, as well as private sector. We think it's really important to allow for social perspective costing, and we cannot really do that without this additional information. And this is, I think, is the only really new thing that USAID historically did not have, but we think it's really, really important. And has been OMB approved, which is critical. So it does give us that legitimacy. Okay, so moving on, this is basically the most important slide here, I guess. So these are the standard categories that we have that's supposed to cover the entire sector. All of our programs must report on category 1, which basically captures general operations management and reporting. The rest of the categories are kind of pick your own adventure in a way, depending on what your destination is. So if your destination is improving teacher cadre, right? If we want to build up the capacity of teachers, then you will want to report on in-service educator training, probably teaching and learning materials, probably capacity strengthening of government systems. So basically, the idea here is that we align how our expenditures are captured with the core objectives of the program. And since education objectives at large are specified in our policy, it's pretty easy for us to identify these predetermined standard categories that correspond to those large objectives and request that our partners, our implementing partners, basically tag the expenditures within their accounting systems accordingly. So that would allow us then in turn to have this way of generating comparable data across all of our implementing partners in all the 64 countries where we work. Important to note that the technical guidance that we have covers in great depth and detail how these categories function, what to include, what not to include, really guiding users through this process of decision-making, how to set up their system effectively. So this is what it's sort of, actually, here's the example of the guidance. It's just super quick slide just to show that we have a lot of information about it. This is sort of what a report may look like. As you can see, we have here our standard cost ingredients, what we call ingredient categories, not ingredient. Sorry about that. We call them ingredient categories: labor, fringe, travel, and so on. And as a columns here, we can see cost categories, which basically is why the money was spent, right? I'm sorry, I don't know why it keeps clicking on me. So hopefully that's clear. Moving along. Okay, so this is our framework that guides cost analysis, and you can see that explained in great detail in our cost analysis guidance, and Emma and Chris will walk you guys through this in a minute, like how it all shows up in our cost analysis course. But fundamentally, what it emphasizes is that we focus on three major types of cost analysis: cost economy, cost efficiency, and cost effectiveness, which correspond to like a traditional log frame, right? If we just look at the inputs, we can actually learn a lot about cost drivers through simple cost economy analysis of expenditures by cost category. Then if we add outputs, we can generate cost efficiency estimates. Basically, how much does it cost to train a teacher? How much does it cost to produce a book? And if we link it up with the data on outcomes, then we can produce cost effectiveness estimates, which is, I guess, holy grail. Everybody wants those. And what's important to note is that while everybody's really excited about cost effectiveness analysis and everybody always wants that, we're excited about it too, but in reality, I think fewer than 15% of education evaluations are experimental in nature. So vast majority of our evaluations are performance evaluations that don't really generate data on outcomes. So cost effectiveness analysis really cannot be applied to those, right? We can only use it with impact evaluations when we use experimental and quasi-experimental methods to measure outcomes, right? So that's an important point. I'll just breeze real quick through the remainder of the slides just to make sure that Emma and Chris have enough time. So basically, this is cost economy analysis and value for money. This is an example of what you guys can see if you dig deep into the expenditures that we received, the expenditure reports. It gives us a lot of interesting information, and it also serves the foundation for subsequent cost efficiency and cost effectiveness analysis. So regarding those, they require data, as I already mentioned, on outputs and outcomes paired with relevant cost data. The results of these analyses are very sensitive to what we include or exclude in the calculations, as shown on this slide. So it is essential for our efforts to first choose which interventions we want to cost out, what we want to compare those to be able to determine which interventions might be most cost efficient or cost effective, and how we can sustain those. But again, this is something that we find it really, really important, and a lot of cost analyses out there don't really pay much attention to this point, that those estimates are super sensitive to inclusion or exclusion criteria, and it's important to be very transparent about it. That's pretty much all from me. We have a ton of resources, happy to share them all. And we'll switch over to Chris and Emma for their presentation. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Elena. Let me just get our slides up here. All right. So Chris and I are going to talk to you about the cost analysis course that we've been developing to really bring the cost analysis guidance to life and make it something that other people in the sector who are interested in this can learn about and engage with and really practice in a hands-on way. So our cost analysis course has two sort of different tracks and audiences. So the first one is a certification track. We're really envisioning this being targeted towards people who do or want to do cost analysis, who want to be certified to conduct the cost analysis methods that USAID education funded programs use. This track requires people to pass a prerequisite quiz, just sort of a pre-test to make sure that you have enough background information to be able to grasp all of the concepts in the course and have sort of the background you need for everything that follows to make sense. You will need to take the course modules in order, pass quizzes as you go, and then pass a final exam. And then when you do that, you'll receive a certificate at the end stating that you're certified in USAID's cost analysis methods. The other option is for folks who don't necessarily need to be certified. This might be program staff who just want to better understand cost analysis terms, the process, the methods, the details, how the findings are used. Maybe they're only sort of viewing this cost analysis process from specific points along the way and not really the person who's going to be doing the entire process start to finish. And in that case, they can do the course, they can skip around and learn whatever they're most interested in. So they don't have to do every piece in order. They're not required to do the pre-test or pass the final exam, and then they won't be certified, but they can still gain this content. So 2 different options will be available based on the need of the audience. These are our overall objectives for the course. Sort of the high level ones, we have some more detailed ones, but in general, we want participants who take the course to be able to explain the role of cost analysis in meeting our goals of sustainability and value for money, to recognize the terminology we use and understand the requirements for cost analysis. What data do we need? To be able to apply the cost analysis process, methods, and tools to complete these different types of analyses Elena just discussed, and then to be able to collaborate and communicate effectively with audiences, including USAID, our partner governments, implementing partners, and others. So not just sort of the hard skill, what is an analysis, but also what does this look like in practice and how do we communicate about this analysis to the people who are involved in the process. The course follows our cost analysis guidance, which you should have the link for in the chat. It has 8 modules in total, plus the final exam, and it's clocking in about 17 hours to complete. So it is a pretty hefty course, and that's because this content and work are similar to a master's level 1 semester course. So this is really extensive and useful, and those who finish it should really have a lot of information and practice that they've been able to do by the end of it. So I'm going to pass over to Chris to talk us through what the sort of content of the course looks like.
Thank you so much, Emma. Emma, I'm going to ask you to move the slides when it's time, okay? So first of all, my name's Chris, and I see friends on the line. So hello to you guys that are on that I know. I get the best part of the presentation. I get to talk to you about all the technical stuff. So feel free to ping me with detailed questions if you have them, and I'll do my best to respond as soon as I get done with the speaking part. All right, so let's first talk about the prerequisite exam. This is just for the certification track. People who just want to go through the course, as Emma explained, in kind of a continuing education type of way, they don't have to do this. They can go through the course and pick and choose exactly what they need to know, really to cherry pick. You have a specific question about methods. You have a specific question about what is cost economy anyway, and what do you do with it? You can go through and you can find that. Now, for those who want to be certified, there is this prerequisite exam that you have to take, but it's pretty basic stuff. So the first part is basic knowledge of Excel. We have specifically tried not to use a stats software to run these calculations. We're trying hard to stay in Excel simply because it's more accessible to people. So you have to have a basic understanding of Excel. You also have to have an understanding of key terms. And these are not super technical terms. I'm talking about the difference between outputs and outcomes. And so things of that nature, as Elena mentioned, if you know a log frame, you're going to know this. Some research background would be helpful in being able to link what somebody wants to know, what problem they're trying to solve, with the question, with the data analysis, and how you talk about it. So that line of research background could be really helpful to you in this. Also understanding how to engage with stakeholders and who you're going to need to ask for what type of information, and just how to engage with them on, again, what are you trying to solve? Because you don't want to go through this whole thing and not even be able to answer their questions. So getting this up front, super important. I'm actually going to talk about that more in just a little bit. And basic understanding of an international development like, what is an implementing partner? What's USAID's role? Big, really overarching things of that nature. Okay, Emma, next slide. So the first part of the course is set up in 2 modules. Module 1 is the cost analysis introduction, and that's your basic stuff, like the overview, the objectives that we just went through, the background, as Elena has talked about, key terminology, which you really need to know. I'm going to liken this to statistics quite a bit because there is a lot of parallels to that, as Elena also had earlier mentioned. So you really have to know the terms and know what they mean. So starting with that, USAID approaches to cost measurement are introduced, and cost analysis introduction and 6 steps. Module 2 are the different types of analysis. Okay, so for people who really like to know the details of what type of cost analysis, as Elena had mentioned, we're talking cost economy, which is how much did things cost overall by different categories. And you can do that retrospective, concurrent, or prospective if you're going to do a prospective type of modeling, which you can learn to do. There's cost efficiency, which you can also do retrospective, prospective, and concurrently. You can do, and also cost effectiveness, which we're only teaching how to do retrospective and concurrent. We are not doing prospective CEA modeling, nor are we doing cost benefit analysis in this course. And we can talk about why. Okay, next slide, Emma. So here's some important things that you're going to learn in Module 2, which is how the stages of an activity actually line up with cost measurement actions. So now, hear me on this. Previous CEAs, which has been, as Elena mentioned, kind of the holy grail, everybody wants a CEA, have taken place retrospectively or concurrently. But when we're also looking at these other methods like cost efficiency and cost economy, we really, and with cost effectiveness as well, you want to start from the beginning. You want to start in the early stages of an activity in the planning and thinking about what are the questions that you want to get answered, making sure that the data that you're capturing is actually going to help you answer those questions and that you don't get to the end and think, oh no, we missed something and now we have a problem. There's a cost reporting manual that helps walk you through that. And also talking about how to set up your accounting system. As Elena mentioned, we don't want this to be a parallel system because that's too big of a lift. We really want this embedded within an organization's accounting structure. That makes it easier. It makes it more sustainable also. And then we talk about implementation and what needs to happen in a cost measurement activity when implementation is happening of a project. And then the analysis phase. So we're really lining this up to make sure that you're staying in step with the organization that's doing the implementation. Okay, next slide. So this to me might be one of the most difficult, it's not the technical part. I mean, there's technical details that are really difficult, but to me, this is probably the most difficult part of cost analysis, is the ability to write a good cost question. And also, as I had mentioned, how to collect the data that are going to answer that cost question. And we walk you through this because if we don't get this right from the beginning, then you're not going to have what you need at the end. So we spend quite a bit of time on this at the beginning of the course, but I think it's really critical. Okay, next slide, Emma. Now, technical content. Okay, are you excited? I'm so excited. So the technical content. So we talk about, like, for example, we have different steps and we walk you through these steps. Step 1 is how to conduct a preliminary data check, just to make sure you have everything you need, right? Because we want to be prepared. Step 2 is to review your objectives and your questions. Step 3, we're actually going to have you write an analysis plan. Often that will be included in a MEL plan, but sometimes it can be separate. So if you can integrate that together, that's the best way to go. And we talk about that. And then step 4 is to prepare for data analysis. So for example, the picture that we have up shows what something might look like that you receive. For example, you're going to have category 1, which is general operations costs, maybe another category because the activity had in-service teacher training, and maybe they had teaching and learning materials. So when you receive the data from the implementing partners, you're going to have them categorized in those cost categories that Elena had previously mentioned. And then we're going to walk you through how to do the analysis step by step. And Emma's going to talk to you about how we do that with the different data sets. Okay, Emma, next slide. Monetizing contributions. So we talk about in the course when you monetize contributions and when you don't, and when you add them in and when you don't add them in. And so this is a new skill for a lot of cost analysts. And so we really want to be specific on how you do it, when you do it, how do you collect the data to do it, and give you examples of what your Excel can look like to help you really organize it in a way that's going to be logical and that can flow with the rest of the analysis. Okay, next slide. Currency adjustments and inflationary adjustments. This is basic, right? Like you have to know how to do this. But here's what's tricky sometimes about currency conversion and inflationary adjustments is, for example, USAID's fiscal year does not necessarily, well, not necessarily, it doesn't line up with the calendar year. And that can throw you when you're talking about how to do a currency conversion or an inflationary adjustment when these years don't line up. So we're going to walk you through what do you do about that. And it also may not even line up with the project year. So all of these timelines can be different, but and that can get tricky. But we're gonna address it and we're gonna walk you through it. Okay, next. Now, the last few modules, module 7 and 8, talk about implementation, like how do you actually run the calculations, how do you do it, and how do you talk about them. And I think what's important about this is, of course, you want to make sure technically that you're running them correctly, and we're really careful about that. But also when you're writing it up and communicating the results, we want to be sure that you can say how you can use these findings and how you cannot use these findings. Because people will often take cost findings and use them for whatever seems to suit their purpose. We want to be super explicit that there are some ways that you cannot use this. For example, if you want to compare, different programs in different contexts, they may be completely different contexts. So let's be careful out there, okay? And not do that. And then you're going to take the final exam. All right, next slide. We go through some of the common challenges that we have come up against. And we've just put them out there and said, this is how we have dealt with them, and here's how we suggest you deal with them as well. Misalignment of cost categories. So as Elena mentioned, USAID has these standard cost categories, but projects change. And so maybe they add a new cost category in, and that can screw up your Excel spreadsheets and just mess it up. And so we walk you through how to make sure that's all aligned. Okay, next slide. And now I'm going to give you just a list of some of the other ones that have been difficult, but we have addressed in the course to talk you through them. So for example, misalignment of units of analysis for monetized contributions, that will screw you up every time. For example, in the picture we have here, like parent volunteers, an hour a month. But you have, the shadow price is going to be however much per month. And so you have to make sure your units align. You cannot compare an hour to a month. You have to make sure all of this lines up. Otherwise, it's not going to be right. The disaggregation issues. So let's say that the expenditures you get in are super aggregated, but the cost question is really specific. We talk about how to deal with that. And we're also really honest and say, you may not be able to answer a question. And we want to be clear and upfront about that if you can't answer it. And it's better to say that than to pretend that you can't. And so, so we have that really how you deal with it. And if you can get a little more information to be able to answer the question to be helpful, great. But this is also going back to why at the beginning you want to set this up early so you can be as specific as you need to. Okay, we also talking about full cost effectiveness, Like what happens if you want to analyze something that takes place in a really specific time period in an overall bigger project. We walk you through that. We talk about complicated outputs and outcomes. For example, let's say you have multiple languages in a single intervention, or let's say you have multiple arms in a cost effectiveness or in a cost efficiency. We walk you through that because that can be a little tricky. Okay, next slide, Emma. Then writing up the results. How do you do that? So a lot of people who are technical are really good at the analysis part, but we really also have to be good at the writing it up part to talk people through who are not technical in what you did and what you found and how they can use it, and again, not use it. And so we walk you through this in the different parts of a cost analysis report because many people haven't written these types of reports before. So we walk you through, how do you write it? What should it include and not include? Okay, next slide, Emma. Now, the final thing I'll talk about are some of the unique contents of this course. For example, my fellow really technical people, understanding why USAID's discount rate is 0. If you don't know what a discount rate is, that's fine. We're going to talk to you about that in the course. Also, the emphasis on perspective taking, the cost to whom. As Elena mentioned, we really look at a social perspective. And so you can analyze cost use a stakeholder analysis of not just USAID's costs, but potential costs to other important stakeholders. How to conduct retrospective, concurrent, and prospective cost analysis. And here's something also that I think is really unique, is generating multiple answers to the same cost question. Here's what I mean. Often in reports, you'll see a CEA. The result is $15 per student for the impact obtained. However, it's actually slightly more nuanced than that. It's typically not just $15. Is that $15 including overhead and management fees? Is that $15 including, for example, some people want development, which is not typically something you'll put in a CEA, but sometimes people want it. Does it include that? And so there can be multiple answers to different questions, and we talk about that. And it goes back to the question and answering the question that the person needs solved. Okay, and then Emma, you're up.
Yes, so I'm just going to talk through some of the sort of learning tools and different functions we have in the course to make it as effective as possible so that those of you who take the course are engaged and can really learn from it. So just to start off the bat, we just have numerous kind of quizzes throughout, small Jeopardy games, things like that, just to make sure that the concepts are being reinforced, that when you go on to the next lesson, you have the important background information from the previous one, just to ensure that the information is flowing throughout the entire course. We also have our little friend Costanza, who accompanies you throughout the course. She introduces each module to you, she provides tips throughout them, and she closes each module by walking through the activity that you completed with you. This is one way too that we want to make sure that we're including sort of real world experience into the course. So we're not just telling you sort of how a textbook would explain how to do cost analysis, but what from our experience as analysts are things that might come up, or tools that we have created that might be useful, or things like that, to make sure that you're really getting guidance from people who have gone through this and know what analysis looks like in a real world, sometimes messy context. We have 2 different data sets that we use throughout the course. So these are fictional data sets that we have created that are robust enough to be able to speak to every piece of our analysis. We have one that is used throughout the course in demonstrations of the steps and the methods. It's what we use to explain how things work. And again, it's fully built out, so we use that throughout the entire course. And then we have a second one that is sort of your hands-on practice data set. And so this is one that you will interact with at the end of each of the modules, where you will do an activity to practice whatever step you were taught. So you will write the cost analysis plan based on this scenario. You will do the data preparation with this data set. You will run the analysis with this data. And so this really helps you because by the end of the course, you have done a complete analysis with this set, you have seen it from start to finish with the same data. You understood what the stakeholder wanted, and you learn how to communicate the results of the analysis you did back to them. So with these data sets, we're ensuring that you don't only have the knowledge, but you have hands-on practice with the skill by the end of the course. And then, like I said, we have these hands-on activities you do. At the end, Costanza will come back, walk you through the activity, not only share with you what the correct answers might be, but also where are common areas where there might be pitfalls or things that are confusing or ways that we handle situations. So again, she's bringing in that really real world experience to make sure that you're getting a real practical application of what this analysis looks like. And then for those that take the certificate track, we have a final exam at the end to make sure you've mastered the material. This is multiple choice, but also some sort of short response, doing calculations, making sure you understand it so that when you finish and are certified, you feel confident that you really learned the skill because you've passed the exam that has all of the key pieces in it. So we have benefits of completing this course. We're really excited about it. We think it's going to be really beneficial to the field in general. For those on the certificate track, they'll be able to become certified to conduct a cost analysis on USAID education projects. So this is getting a bunch of skill, opening you up to a new set of methods that you can do to conduct analyses on these USAID education projects. For those that are doing the continuing education track, this can help them to better understand the specific aspects of cost analysis that will help them use the findings for more cost efficient or cost effective program design and management. So again, even if you're not doing the entire course start to finish to become certified, there's still a lot that you can learn to enhance your knowledge and understanding of cost analysis and how that affects various aspects of program design, management, implementation, and evaluation. So our course is going through clearance. It's getting to the end. We're going to be publishing it soon. And so if you want to get an email when the course goes live, please feel free to email me at this address and I'll make sure you're on our initial distribution list. The course will be available for people to register either for that certification track or the continuing education track. And we really appreciate your support too in getting this course out to yourself, your colleagues, anyone you think that might be interested, because we know that the more people that know the skill, the more analysis we can do, the more comparability we can do between results. It kind of benefits us all to have more people doing this work. So that's all I have. Chris or Elena, do you want to add any sort of closing thoughts about the course or how folks can get engaged with it at this point?
I thought you did a great job. So no, I don't have anything else, but I do see interesting questions that maybe we want to address in the chat. And so I don't know how we want to take those, but if we have time, it would be great, I think, to address them.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. I think this is like super interesting. I think we do have like maybe 10 more minutes to answer some of these questions in the chat. I'm not sure if you guys maybe want to start with Teferi Ende's question, and then we can go into Liz, who is always curious about costing. I'm sure she has lots of questions.
Yes, yeah, I see Liz's question, for example, about cost of USAID staff time. This is a great question. We have informally looked into USAID staff time to support cost measurement in general. We did not pull out cost analysis specifically. We looked more in terms of like the whole cost measurement initiative that starts with making sure that you include cost reporting requirements in the solicitation, working with a partner, making sure they understand the requirement and how to collect cost data, thinking through cost questions, like Chris emphasizes, it's really key, and working with local stakeholders, ensuring that cost questions make sense and they are tailored to the data we can actually collect, right? So it's everybody, like folks frequently want answers to questions that are really, I would say, impossible to answer. Like my least favorite example, how much does it cost to teach a child to read? Well, exactly what do you mean by that, right? So suddenly it's like, What does it mean to read? What, like, do we only cover in school? Do we go outside of school? Like, there's just so many nuances to that. So that's why like we spend a lot of time focusing on that. So to answer your question in brief, we do have some estimates in terms of USAID staff time in general, but it's just, I would say at this point, highly imprecise because we only have covered a portion of USAID's portfolio. So, and I don't presume that folks who we're currently working with are random representatives of USAID staff. Frequently, folks who opt into new initiatives are kind of more knowledgeable about the subject or more entrepreneurial in nature. So, it's hard to generalize from this very non-random sample. And the second question is also a very good question. To what extent the knowledge from the course transferable to other than education projects? We think that the principles of our approach are highly portable. But it is important, I think, to know that we wrote the guidance and the course for donor-funded activities, donor-funded programs. So while you can learn a lot in general about costing, and I'll let Chris speak more to that, I think it's mostly applicable to donor world because this world is somewhat unique, I would say. It's different from like a lot of, for example, domestic for-profit education activities, right? That are, again, fundamentally different in nature. So yeah, and the last Liz's question about costing opportunities. We didn't actually think about posting on our website, but there is a push for more cost work. So we might expand our website to have that. But right now we don't have it. Over to Chris and Emma.
So let me, if I can, add on to what Elena said about the applicability of like the methods to wider cost analysis. So I have actually used USAID's method for non-USAID funded activities only in the extent of trying to help them get the data set up beforehand so that that's all done early on into the cost categories. So they were not USAID funded, but I did encourage them to set up their accounting software so that it could run just like if it was a USAID funded that was following the protocol. And it worked fine. It worked really well. I think the biggest aspect of this is that we're really trying to build a portfolio at this point and come up with a lot more projects so that we have, for example, you go to Tufts database and they have a whole CEA like database of healthcare initiatives that have been costed out. We are super far behind, but we're trying really hard to catch up. And this is part of that effort to catch up, is to create a database so that we can learn more about the cost and we can learn more about how to make money go further than what it currently does. And so, in short, I use this work only in international, but I only do international work. So domestic work is not something I touch, but in my international, works fine.
Can I just also jump in now to answer Jess's question, which is really good one, about using our approach to cost out programs that perhaps are implemented as part of like a suite of programs. So a couple of points here. First of all, like a little plug for Diopter tool that I know many of you know about, that IRC initially developed and works with implementing partners. It's basically like an add-on to the accounting software that allows you to do just like in real-time cost analysis of the very basic cost economy and cost efficiency analysis if output data are added. So that is sort of is helpful in part in terms of what you want to achieve. But I would also argue that our approach is actually completely fine to answer questions relating to cost of a program that is implemented as part of, a bigger portfolio, because it's the analyst's decision that determines how costs are allocated. And Chris, over to you for perhaps more specificity on this.
So yeah, so Jesse, it really depends how the accounting system is set up and to what detail, how specific the costs are to the different research questions that you're answering. But it does come back to that. And people that I've worked with, sometimes they can get the the accounting software down that specific. Sometimes they can't because maybe it's a small organization and they just don't have the capacity to do it. But big organizations, I haven't had a problem with them being able to customize their accounting system. And if they do have a problem, then we just address it and we work with it. But we do it upfront and early on. That was a good question, by the way.
Yeah, and Liz, excellent question about the underlying methodology. It is ABC, activity-based costing. So ingredients method we adore and love, and like both Chris and I as students of Levin. So, you know, totally for it. Unfortunately, that particular method relies on existence of extant data that we simply don't have in countries where we work. We don't have databases of various labor categories with nuances of geographies and so on. And also those costs highly volatile. So in that sense, the true ingredient-based method, we can't really use in international development. And I think Levin himself acknowledged that, you know. So we use ABC for cost data capture. And for the analysis, we use what we call modified ingredients method, right, Chris?
It's true. Back to Jesse's point, yeah, you can have a granularity issue with the accounting system. But method-wise, we are using ABC more so than ingredients. We started with ingredients. I mean, Hank, you know, Jesse, Hank. So, you know, was my advisor and we went through training on this, but it's too granular. It's too hard and too difficult of a lift for the international organization. So we had to find a way that used existing systems in order to get the information that USAID needs in order to make bigger portfolio level decisions. And this was just the best possible way to do that.
Yeah, and just also to add to that, one of our key principles in our approach is the right balance of burden with precision. So we totally understand that, you know, as analysts, the more data, the better. Give me micro data. I'll be so happy. And like Chris, you should see her, how happy she is when she gets micro data, right? But we also appreciate that microdata, detailed, like accurate microdata, comes with a huge burden and cost to the implementer. So there's this fine line that in the balance we need to find, right? Like what is good enough for us to make sure that it informs decisions in a meaningful way, right? But it at the same time not excessively burdensome to our partners. And partners themselves, we hope over time will build the capacity to do their own analysis and recognizing like the utility of their own microdata that they're sitting on, you know, might allocate certain LOE to their financial analysts to allow for routine analysis of cost drivers and, you know, just making sure that this information is really useful and feeds back into the program. But we didn't want to ask partners to commit to collecting that kind of microdata, not only because it's illegal, but also because we just don't have the infrastructure right now to fully benefit from it. So it's sort of a little bit concurrent process, right? As we are building the capacity of the sector to collect, process, analyze, and use the data, you know, at the same time as we produce the guidance for how to do that, so that and try to encourage it from our own side. So we feel like it's a decades-long process. We're not gonna get there overnight, but right now we are on the side of like less is more, and less information, less burden is more important, not to, you know, freak people out and alienate them.
I can quickly speak to Kevin's question too about how we deal with donations or volunteer time that may not find its way into the accounting system. So as part of the data collection process, we ask partners to submit contributions reports. So essentially a template that we give them, very easy to fill out with information about some of these costs that have been contributed by the government or by partner organizations or other folks in the implementation process. And so we do have all of that data when we go to analysis on volunteer time or donations or things like that. We don't ask for every single little thing because we understand burden. So we ask for things that are over a certain dollar amount and that are actually necessary for the implementation. And then in the course, we talk through when and how to monetize those based on the perspective that you're taking with the analysis.
Perfect. Well, thank you all so much for taking the time to present. I'm very excited to see when this gets launched, to see, you know, how the training looks and get some of the details about what's in there. And yeah, so I think that's all for today. I wanted just to give a quick blurb. In December, we'll be having another brown bag lunch with Justin LeBay from IRC to talk about Dioptra. I know we talked a little about this today, but we'll be going more into detail then. So look out for an invitation from then. And as always, if anyone on the call is ever interested in doing their own BBL, just feel free to reach out to us and we'd be happy to set it up. And thank you again to our panelists.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Actually, I really would love to have the recording of this session. So if you could share, that'd be great.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you,
All right.
everyone.
Thanks,
all.
everybody.